Right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed our walk-on music. Some of the feedback I get is that that is some people's favorite part of these sessions, which makes my heart very happy because it is a Samantha curated walk-on list of songs. So I already hit record. How's everyone doing today?
Doing great, Samantha. It's good to see you all.
Good. Hey, Nolga. Got a thumbs up from Jose.
Hello, good morning. Morning for me, not sure if it's morning for everybody else, but
It is morning for me as well. All right. Well, we might be a small but mighty and intimate group today, which is just fine. I feel like these conversations get really in the weeds, which is fantastic when we're a little bit smaller. So I am going to go ahead and kick us off. So thank you for joining our early June community of practice about all things SNAP E&T for all of you who have been through one of REDF's now Redefine um, former SNAP employment and training learning cohorts. You are all SNAP E&T leaders now, whether you know that or not, but you are, no matter where you are on the SNAP E&T sort of timeline, as I like to say. Today, we're going to talk about braiding and blending funding. And we're going to get into some conversations around what the differences between braiding is, what is blending, and some examples, and how it can really be a catalyst to in expanding and increasing impact in strategic ways. Our good friends, Kathy and Erin, are going to be leading this conversation today. They are SNAP E&T experts, subject matter experts, and especially around this topic. So this was a co-collaboration between the two of them, and I'm really excited for today's conversation. Just to reiterate, we're gonna welcome everyone, and we're gonna just jump right into what the difference between braiding and blending is. Going to go over an overview. We have a discussion, some examples, and then what's coming up next. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
So we thought we'd start with an icebreaker to see how you feel about budgets and financial situations. And I did these pictures for Samantha because she's such a cat person. So if you could put in chat, when it comes to budgets and financial situations, what are you? Are you a cool cat, a scaredy cat, or a roll with a cat? So just you can put A, B, or C in chat. Let us know how you feel about budgets and finance. Got an A from Todd. All three. Some C's. Trying to get to A. No B's? I'm surprised. We usually have some B's. Some scaredy
That's
cats.
good. That's good, though.
That is good. That's great. That means we've got experienced people with us today. Yay. All right. I want to be the cool cat. So we're going to talk about the difference between blending and braiding. And I'm going to try and do some, use it kind of a visual to go through this. With blending funding, multiple sources are combined into a single pool for unified program delivery or distribution. So you take three different funding sources and put them all in one big pool, and then you use that fund to fund your program delivery. Okay. The sources lose their individual identities, so when the money is being paid, you don't know if it's coming from funding for source blah, funding source A, funding source B, or funding source C. So the three colors have all combined into this kind of dark blue. That's a blended funding source. Okay. For SNAP E&T, you can't do that because you have to be able to identify what each of your funding sources are coming from. It doesn't mean that money that you're not seeking reimbursement for can't be part of a blended program fund, but in order to get it reimbursed for SNAP E&T, you have to be able to track it. And that's where the next slide comes into play. Which is braiding funding. Okay. And that's where you track each of the funding sources separately. They retain their own identity, but you're bringing them all together to braid them together, as in the picture there, to show that you can always follow the track of each of the individual funding sources, but you're bringing them all together to fund the program. So you always know which fund funded which piece of your program, but together all three of the funding sources can fund them or fund the program together. So in the blended, they lose their identity when they go into a pot, but in braided, they have to keep their identity because you have to be able to say to your program manager, well, this particular fund funded the supportive services, and this particular fund funded my staff, and this particular fund did X. And so that's the way it works with the braiding funding. You keep the identity, and you always know what paid for what. Next. So again, here's a comparison between the two. Blended funds are pooled, so they make one big pot. Braided funds remain separate. Blended becomes a single funding source. Braided funds are separately tracked and reported. Blended funds are more common with flexible funders, so funders don't care. They just give you the cash and you can do whatever you want with it. And is much more common with flexible funders. Braided is much easier to do with government grants because they often need you to track exactly which fund covered what. Blended requires agreement on common rules, like how the fund is going to be used. If you're combining all the different funding sources, each of the funding source has to be willing to agree to what you're going to spend that money on. Braided funding, because you're keeping it separate, you maintain compliance with each source. So you might have a source of funding that says you can only spend this on transportation, or you can only spend this on childcare. And by being able to track it separately, you can maintain compliance with that individual source. Blended is less common, but it's much simpler administratively because you don't have to track each individual source for what it's paying for. Braided is most common in all the human services programs, which is what we're dealing with SNAP E&T. And so these two words are sometimes mixed up, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood the difference between blended and braided. Are there any questions about the difference between these two and why they might be used differently? Okay,
No questions.
look
Okay.
at that. Everybody understands. So, why would you want to braid your funds? So, it's in your interest that maybe you anticipate that all your current funding sources can't cover all your participant needs. So you want to stretch, so you want to pull in a new funding source. Or maybe you're going to use some federal funding and some non-federal funding to cover all of your costs. And that's absolutely fine because you can track the federal funding separate from your non-federal funding. And so that way you're stretching the impact of all your funding sources for your students. The best example, you might have a federal funding source that is covering staffing, okay? Then you can use all your non-federal funding sources to cover your participant reimbursements and maybe some of the training costs, depending on how you manage your training costs. So the example that I always give is that if you have a federal funding grant, oftentimes you're told to always spend the federal funding first. And depending on how much federal funding you have, the grant might run out before the end of the year. And then at the end of the year, you're left spending non-federal funding and getting reimbursement just for that part of the year that you ran out of your federal funds. If you spread those federal funds out all year and your non-federal funding out all year, you can seek reimbursement all year. You're braiding the funding. You're using some federal funding all year and some non-federal funding all year. So you've stretched the impact and you've gotten more reimbursement for the program over the course of that year. If you're braiding funding, you want to find funds that are targeting similar populations with similar program outcomes. That makes it easier to blend them. So WIOA funding and SNAP E&T funding have a lot of the same objectives, so they're easily blended. Or excuse me, easily braided. There I go, saying the wrong word. Easily braided between WIOA and SNAP E&T. If you know the capacity and you understand, Sam's asking if any of you have SNAP E&T and WIOA funds. Anybody get funds to do WIOA training on top of what you're doing with SNAP E&T? No. Okay. I guess not. All right. How many of you get some other federal funds that are supporting your programs along with non-federal funds? Anybody? Okay, you have several state grants. Are they federal? Oh, there, okay. BDI does. Do you braid your funding, Todd? City and state. Yeah. Okay, good. So when you're braiding funds, you need to make sure that you have the capacity to track everything. You can build structures to separate out all of your funds and managing the multiple programs. You're ready to develop clear policies and program guidelines for braiding. And you're potentially ready to streamline parts of your program, such as applications or enrollment processes, so that if you had two different programs that were using similar funding, you could bring them together. And that your leadership and fiscal stakeholders are open to and willing to collaborate on this strategy. It does take capacity in order to do this, to be able to braid your funding. But in the long run, oftentimes, again, it helps you build capacity and it also helps support more students or clients in the long run. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Erin.
Hi, everybody. So as you know, the Center for Employment Opportunities, we operate in multiple states and we run a social enterprise. And so we have, like, in every location, just multiple funding streams, and some of them are local, some of them are state. One of our biggest funding streams is SNAP E&T. So braiding funds is essential in our programs. And so I'm just kind of curious too, if one of my questions was like, are you currently using a blended funding model, and are you thinking that maybe you should do a braided model? Or maybe nobody is doing blended and everybody is using braided. I'm just curious if anybody is using a blended model currently. not seeing anything. So maybe everybody already is doing braiding, and if that's the case, you're probably off to a great start. But the nice thing is, as it was mentioned, is like, yes, braiding might seem like it's a little bit more work, but in the long run, it does open up additional funding streams that you might not otherwise have access to if you don't have the mechanisms to be able to do the tracking properly. So the great thing about our model is that we are able to utilize the same model in just about every state, with slight tweaks sometimes depending if we have certain funding streams that require certain requirements. But in general, the great thing is our participants who we serve, they don't see a difference in the program delivery. It's one unified program. Our major funding streams are through like SNAP E&T, as I mentioned, philanthropy, public, state, local grants, and on also, we are running a social enterprise, so there is income coming in from that as well. But again, just all towards creating that one unified model that provides all of the services to our participants.
Aaron,
Yeah.
there's a question in the chat, and you might want to get to a couple of examples before addressing it. But Kristen is asking, stating, I may be using blended, but I want to braid with better tracking. I have no systems for it yet. So that might be some tips and tricks that we can address that might be helpful.
Yeah, and I apologize. I wanted to have one of our fiscal people on the call so they could kind of speak to this a little bit better. But there are grant management programs out there that allow you to do just that. And they're specifically tailored so that you're able to track your revenue sources and where they're coming from. And then how do you allocate those expenses to your various program expenses. So that's first and foremost, I'd say you need to have an accounting system that supports it. And I don't know if anybody from SGI have any kind of feedback to that either, but that's a good. Because I was going to say I don't really know what kind of system we have, but I know that we're in the process of switching over to a new system. So.
Kristen, it could be a follow-up conversation if you request like one-on-one technical assistance where we can work with you one-on-one and your team to kind of figure this out if this is a priority for you and your organization. Oh, great. Okay, yeah. I will write that down to follow up with you.
Yeah, we just had a previous discussion with another group, very similar as it relates to the infrastructure and how do you run federal grants and the systems, and it always revolves around that grant management system and the accounting piece, because it's obviously one of the most important pieces of it. But this slide again, it's just showing the multiple funding streams and where these kinds of come through and how those funding streams, excuse me, are supporting various operations within our program. And again, the key thing is that the funds stay separate, but our service delivery is seamless to not only our participants, but oftentimes to the people on the ground delivering our program. So a lot of it happens just on the back end, and how do we report that and how do we handle the finance pieces of that.
Do you want the next slide, Aaron?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Perfect.
So, again, just another representation, but also with you doing the revenue piece. So, part of that is you're tracking the incoming funds, but you also need to track how those funds are then getting allocated to your, your revenue streams when you expend those funds. So you have a tracking of the buckets of the money coming in, but like within SNAP E&T, you also need to be able to identify those sources and then also have a cost allocation methodology that explains how your expenses are being tracked and allocated accordingly. Again, like this is just a sample example where your case managers and your job coaches and how those costs are going to get allocated and the methodology for how those costs get allocated to your various streams. Your participant supports might be like, as Kathy was mentioned, might be covered by one funding source in particular, and that's where you're going to pull those from. Go ahead, next slide, please. So again, a sample of like what a general ledger would look like, and that basically that key piece that allows you to do that braiding is that you have that fund code. And so in our system, every time that we have a different funding source and also how we're allocating funds on the expense side, you assign a fund code to that, and that's how you keep that braiding separate in your financial system is what you're going to be looking for. So when we are running a location, all of those funding sources that we have the incoming funds to, the revenue is recorded under those separate funding sources. That's how they're tracked. And then we go to allocate those expenses out. We're allocating those based off of the rules in the cost allocation plan that we've established for those locations that support those funding sources. Samantha's asking if there are any fiscal or accounting folks on the call today. And if you are, I would love to hear from you. Just also because my fiscal person couldn't come today, and that's really what I wanted.
Yeah, I'm just curious, does this slide speak to you? Because is this your language? And if this looks similar to what any of you all do, but it doesn't look like any fiscal folks are on the call today, so that's okay.
Okay, go ahead. We can go to the next slide. So again, this is just really another example of various funding sources, but going to the same model. So it's kind of repetitive. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. And also cost allocation. And so if you look over onto the right-hand side, the left side shows kind of like where those funding streams are coming from. And then, important part of that cost allocation method is understanding how are you allocating your expenses to each of these. And the thing that it comes to when you're braiding the funds and you're bringing them together is to make sure that they all work together. And so that means your cost allocation plan needs to be compliant with all of your funding sources too, and that they're kind of like an agreement that's how you allocate expenses. SNAP E&T is an example. They have strict rules on how you allocate your expenses and what will be allowable to be billed to SNAP and what is not. So a key part of that is having that methodology down so that when you are seeking reimbursement under these funding sources that you can clearly support that funding mechanism. But again, without the braided funding stream, that's not really a possibility. SNAP E&T for our organization can run anywhere as high as 40% of our total revenue. So it can be pretty significant in some locations. So it's really important that we have that down pat and that we're able to support it. So having that fiscal piece down is just that's what this whole session is all about. So we can't stress that enough. Next slide. Again, this is kind of repetitive of showing how the expense side of things are getting allocated to the various funds. That is just next slide.
Yeah, I just want to say, for folks, it didn't sound like there's any fiscal folks on the call today, but if this is something you're considering or comes up, you'll have access to this slide deck just to review back. It might be helpful in conversations in the future, so it's always available to you as a resource as well as this recorded session. And then just want to also reiterate, if at some point you would like some one-on-one technical assistance for my lovely team of experts here to meet with any of you all and your teams, we are available and happy to meet with you.
And also, there's a lot of great budget templates out there for when you're trying to use the braided funds. And so it identifies your funding sources, but then also how your expenditures come through. And it allows you to identify gaps in your funding sources to where maybe certain services that you have aren't going to be able to be covered. And so that budget tool, when you're trying to map out your program and how can you braid these funds together, that budget tool can be really helpful in identifying those gaps, because then you have to it's just a matter of identifying, do you have additional funding sources elsewhere that could fill those gaps to fulfill your program need? We found some that have been very helpful with that. So again, the thing that makes braiding work is, one, you have a program that supports it. You can have, if you have shared participant outcomes against multiple funding sources, that you can combine and pull those together, and your funders are all in agreement that this is acceptable. Then that's the first thing. And the second thing is, you have that fiscal oversight that's necessary to keep track of that, so that you can accurately separate out those funds and expenses and make sure that you're doing those allocations properly. And then just the compliance piece of, can you get the backup documentation that you need to support the source of your funds, how that they were brought into your system, and then how that you're ensuring that you're not duplicate billing, as an example. So if you're allocating expense, you can't, double bill from one funding source to another. And that's where your cost allocation plan also comes into play. So your accounting system can control that a lot. And that's where our grants accounting system is great at, because it ensures that once we take an expense that we have allocated to a certain funding source, that it can no longer be utilized to try to bill another funding source, because it keeps that in and out tracking and where it's going. So having that system set up is kind of key to being able to do it efficiently.
Cheyenne has a question in the chat. Cheyenne, can you come off mute for a second? Not to put you on the spot, but this is a great question. Is asking if we are able to share any templates, or where they can find them. Um, and it sounds like accounting systems is what she's referring to. Can you come off mute and for a second?
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, I'm curious, what templates do you think would be like most helpful? Could you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, honestly, I think this is like thank you for this meeting, but this has been such a hard piece for us, because we kind of are like running off like some Excel spreadsheets, and like we do have a controller, but we're just so small that we're
Hmm.
trying to, who's allocated where, how that goes, and it's very confusing. It's a lot. So if there's any templates or anything that like we may be able to look out, or any like even accounting software or something that you guys are using that would be
Let's
real. We're in the
chat.
same boat of like, we have these multiple grants, we have staff that are kind of across different things that are getting
Oh
covered
yeah.
on things. And it could becomes just as a smaller organization until we get a little bit bigger and get more funding to be able to kind of pay for more
Hmm.
stuff. I
Hmm.
think we'll get into a better place, but we're kind of in that like middle road area, it feels like.
So yeah, you're with Los Angeles in Los Angeles
Yes.
County.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And I know that we've been working with you a little bit recently, so I'm going to put this on the agenda for your team. But yes, there are some things and tools that we have that I'll ask our team to put together. Dina, I know you're on the call. Um, I think you were just in communication with them, yeah?
Yeah, yeah. I was just gonna check my calendar
I think we have a call
because
today
we
Oh,
do.
at
perfect.
1:30. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
like,
Look at
I've
that.
already got
1:30.
this.
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Absolutely. Yes. And yeah, so in preparation for a hopeful opportunity to come on board, which is hopefully on the horizon, this is a great way to set you up for success.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
thanks.
Kathy, I see your question as like, no, I was using the template example when you're doing like the budgeting piece and you're trying to figure out when you have your multiple funding sources. But wouldn't it be nice if you had an accounting system that actually you could plug it into some interface and it just does it for you? I don't know one, but I'm also not the fiscal person on that. But when we do a lot of our budgets too, like we still, that budgeting piece is still done in spreadsheets.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think that's more what I don't think templates for accounting systems exist. Their general ledger is a consistent thing, but it's understanding how to allocate the expenses, which is what I think you're asking, Cheyenne. And your TA team can definitely help you with that.
there are some softwares that you can manipulate to help curate your invoices and separate those funds that I have worked with. It gets a little in the weeds, so bring popcorn, but
Yeah, unfortunately, cost allocation is never an easy thing. It can be. I don't want to sometimes it can be, but there are areas where it becomes kind of tricky to do cost allocation and also to make a system do it properly. But that's where it's like we have a fiscal whole grants accounting team, and that's all that they do. And I would love to have somebody on here, and maybe we can connect. If you do have questions, we can kind of get one of our fiscal experts and kind of just walk through some of the things that we're doing, or some of our partners. I do know that we have an organization, have some consultants currently in-house, and they're looking at doing a full overhaul of our grants management system and finance. And so we're kind of all excited to see what's going to come about for that, because even for us, I think we've kind of outsized the system that we're currently using. So we're looking to get something that's a little bit more robust. Kathy, I think I'll send this one back over to you.
oh, Kathy, I think you're on mute.
I know when I'm talking. Did anybody have any questions for Aaron about his examples? Any other questions before we? Okay, so here are just some best practices on the programmatic side. Make sure you have clear policies and processes for documentation to make sure that you're not doing any duplication of spending. You can't charge the same thing to two different funding sources. Make sure you have clear pathways. You want to have strong and frequent communication between all of the people, your managers, your case managers, your accounting people, so that there isn't anything lost in the translation, and that everybody agrees to follow whatever plan you've set up. I don't know how many times we can say this. You need to have standard operating procedures for your SNAP E&T program. Write things down, change them when you change them. Keep those standard operating procedures updated. Love to say that we're all going to be working in this job 10 years from now, but if I win the lottery, I'm not going to be in this job anymore. No offense, I love working with all of you, but if I win the lottery, I'm going to retire. And so if I was running a program and I won the lottery and I left, the program should not be dependent upon whether or not I'm the only one that knows how the SOP works for braided funding. So you want to make sure that you have your standard operating procedures written down so that if you do win the lottery and walk away, someone else can pick up the pieces. For your fiscal staff, supporting documentation is really critical. So when fiscal says to you, well, I need this receipt or I need this piece of information, the purchase orders or whatever, you kindly and without growling or grumbling, give what they need, because that's how they can keep track of the separate funding sources, and then you can maximize your reimbursement based on that. So, it really is a collaboration. That's one of the things that's unique about SNAP E&T, is that it really is a collaboration between the programmatic side and the fiscal side, and you really have to work together. Cost allocation, we've mentioned a couple of times, is really important for SNAP E&T, and developing a unified budget that clearly delineates the contribution of each funding source to various program components. that's kind of, Cheyenne, I think what you're talking about, making sure that you can allocate from the different funds to the different, you know, which fund is covering 20% of the staff member, which covering another 20%, so that you can allocate all the different funds to cover everybody's expenses. Um, and then again, in the fiscal side, they want to make sure that there are some internal controls to identify any duplication of services so that you're not double charging or double dipping or doing something you shouldn't be doing. Okay, so we'd love to hear from, or supplanting, thank you, Erin. So we'd like to hear from you. Um, do you have an example of successful co-enrollment that you've done maybe with two different programs so that uh, a client or a participant was funded from two different sources to programs that might have similar funding sources so that you could use them? If so, why was it successful? And what was the outcome for the participant when they were co-enrolled?
I don't want to put anyone on the hot seat, but I think Todd may, based from his comment in the chat earlier.
Sure. Yeah, I'll even come on camera here if possible. All right.
Yeah.
So we have a program in which we receive state funding. It is a pathway to employment program, and we receive state funding from Voc Rehab that pays for the participants or interns' wages during the program, and then philanthropy has paid for the instruction in essence, and we've kept the separate ledgers in order to showcase both of those different revenue streams.
Do you use any templates or things in conjunction with your fiscal team to help with any of this?
I do not, because that is not my my
Yeah,
focus.
yeah.
But our VP of contracts and handles compliance does keep track of the spend down of any grant funds as well as the wages that are earned. So it does keep track of that. I'm not aware of what template is used.
Gotcha, gotcha. Thank you. Sorry, thank you for letting me put you in the hot seat for a second.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I know I can think of one. I mean, we have multiple, but we have a similar program. I think it's in Colorado as an example. We have some state funds, and it's covering. We're running a transitional jobs crew, so work-based learning transitional jobs crew, and the state program is funding a very similar model, but it doesn't cover exactly all of the expenses. That's such as like with our SNAP E&T, we're operating under the subsidized work-based learning, so we're able to get the wages subsidized. So some of those expenses under the state program are covering the supportive services and some of our program staff for that portion. But then like the supportive services, or I'm sorry, and the subsidized wages that participant is earning, we're able to bring through the SNAP E&T. So that's a prime example how we're able to leverage those multiple funding sources, but some of them have restrictions on what are allowable expenses and not. So just trying to maximize those incoming funds and get the biggest bang for the buck, I guess you could say.
Anybody else want to share? I mean, I can share another example as well. It's for more from the education side, but I ran an adult education program in a K-12 school system, and we got Title II money through WIOA, and we were always told to spend it all first, and we always ran out of money by the third quarter. And then, so the only time I could get reimbursement for the SNAP E&T program was in the fourth quarter. But only a percentage of my students were SNAP E&T, so I got a small reimbursement fourth quarter period. But so I went to my budget office and I said, if you let me spread the Title II money out over the whole year and get reimbursed all 4 quarters, we'll still spend all of the money, but we'll bring more money into the program. So the Title II money and the local money that funded the program the last quarter of the year got spread out, and we maximized our reimbursement for the full year. And so that was a way to have the Title II funds and the Title II federal funds and our local funds maximize the reimbursement that we brought into the program, and it made a big difference for our program.
Thanks, Kathy. This is a really great example of like thinking about how you can structure your funding streams to really maximize impact, right? Because that's really at the end of the day what we're trying to do is maximize impact for the people that we serve, and while creating like as little amount of burden on them as possible. Yeah. So if we can think about our different funding streams, what they cover, how we can utilize them to maximize what our overall impact is of these funds, whether they're federal, philanthropic, state, local, what have you. I know it can be painful to think through this, and does require everyone to play nicely with your different departments, even if there is some like separation. But we like to say SNAP E&T requires that everyone plays well together.
Sandbox.
So
No
yeah,
litter
so
box if we
in
go
the
back to our
sandbox. To really maximize impact, and use the funds in the best and most impactful way, which also speaks to like our philanthropy and fundraising teams, right? All right. Kathy, I think the next question.
Sure. The next two questions kind of go together. I mean, has your program made a conscious decision not to braid funding? And if so, why? And then this next question, if your program is braiding funding, what are you finding to be the most difficult part about it? Like, what would you warn another program who might be starting the journey of braiding funding to be careful about? Talk to us, people.
If there's accounting folks, if they're not on the call, it might be like a next layer of conversations. But it can be intimidating. So,
But
I
they're
think
not
the
people.
number one, no, they're not. I think the number one question you always start like up front for us is like the source of the funds, because again, it's that whole, because SNAP E&T is this a federal fund source where this is coming from? Because if that's the case, it's like it might not be a good, this might not braid well, depending on what our needs are, but that's always our first question is what are the requirements of the funding source that is coming in, and will it braid with our other funding source and create that unified program? And when it doesn't, then we have to look at, do we still, is the juice worth the squeeze? Do we still want those funds? And if so, like maybe we need to have a completely separate program over here with its own, revenue and expenses that's just completely separate from the unified model that we, ideally we would love for everything to go into that, because we want to be able to expand the capacity and the efficiency, so that we get those economies of scale of those various funds. But sometimes that's just not possible. And sometimes you can't break the funds and you have to kind of separate it out and run a parallel program. But
yeah. Todd, you came off mute.
Yeah, it really comes down to the back office capacity too.
Totally.
Our CFO would prefer many times that it's blended. It's just easier from the some of the accounting to have all the money go into the spot and be able
Totally.
to. It's no different than preferring to have operational revenue rather than restricted. But once it is set up, it actually makes things easier in the long term to have the braided and have the protocols in place and the systems. But I think to Aaron's point, sometimes it's just not worth it. And so for some of our programs, it's especially if it's all philanthropic dollars and the level of reporting isn't as detailed, then we don't pursue braided funding, and we don't set it up that way.
The path of least resistance, I always feel like is the accounting and fiscal folks like preferred, which I feel like, yeah, is, resonates across subjects and departments. But,
Todd, to your point, if I could, it's like whenever I see a new grant or award come in and then come in and look at it, and sometimes it's just like, oh, you're just going to give us the money? Like, it's like, who does that anymore? Like, and of course you're like, well, yeah, like we're just going to take that and we're going to be able to, utilize those funds however we want. But most of the times there are strings attached to it and how it needs to be executed. So I just had one the other day and I was like, wait, you just gave us $50,000 to do a program, to run a program. But there was just like, yep, just we'll cut you a check. Here you go. And I'm like,
report
okay,
to us on the
thanks.
results. But as far as how you spent it within that program, that's fine. And many times it is government that wags the dog. In essence, it starts with state and federal needing the detail and the specificity on how things are going to be spent and within certain guardrails, and then we're like, okay, then we're going to go with braided for this entire program, because if we do it for government, it is good practice then to just have the clear guidelines for all of the different aspects for that program.
And I always tell our providers is that your data is gold to your funders, and your data is what tells your story. You can have a great narrative, but if you can't produce the data and the outcomes and be able to present it and track it as such, which is so much of what a lot of your federal and state reporting requests require,
right.
Then you're not able to tell that story.
You'll get funded once.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, guys. At question 3, I think we've kind of bled into any final comments. Thanks so much for everyone who's been chatting with us. This is fantastic, and the whole point of this, SNAP E&T community of practice here. No? Okay. Any questions before we talk about next steps and what's upcoming? No? All right. Thank you, like I said, everyone. If you would like one-on-one technical assistance for you and your team on this subject or all things SNAP E&T, please reach out. I have Lost Angels and Benevolence Farm. I have you guys requesting some follow-up, so you'll be hearing from me shortly. Lost Angels, you'll probably be hearing from Dina in the next couple of days. Anyone else, please email me directly. We have a bonus session that's not on your calendars yet, that is a hot topic right now and has been requested, so we're squeezing it in, and it will be recorded if you can't attend. So supporting time-limited SNAP recipients. So as you all know, HR1 has been implemented or is beginning to be implemented. And one of the things in that provision is that there are work requirements and time limits for folks receiving SNAP. And it looks a little bit different depending on where you are in the nation, but we have some tools and resources and information that we are going to share with you. So that session is scheduled for Thursday, June 25th. You will see it on your calendars shortly. Erin, you're leading that one, correct? Maybe. I think CEO's team, I believe, is leading it. But anyway, you'll hear from us. We do have some pretty lovely resources to share with you. And so I have the description up here for you all to read. I won't read it out loud. So look out for that. If you can't attend, it'll be recorded, like I said. Please, when you get that invite, please feel free to forward to anyone in your teams that might benefit or would like to attend. Everyone's welcome. Share the SNAP E&T love, everybody.
Yeah. It's Sorry, I thought I said that. I was going to say it's such a hot topic that is happening in all of our spaces, especially if you have SNAP E&T as funding sources, and even like the states and counties they're grappling with it as well. So it's definitely number one in discussions that we have just about every day here at CEO. So excited to be able to share what we've been learning from it.
Okay. Um, since construction service work, it sounds like you're going to be at our community retreat. So that's okay. It'll be recorded for you. But if you want to forward that to anyone else that's in your team that won't be in Chicago, uh, please
Thank
feel free.
you. It should have says Wanda Rogers
Oh, hey,
instead of
Wanda.
instead of construction service workers. Sorry, I always try and check, but I
That's okay.
never can get it on time. But I will be in Chicago at your 2-day event. So
Yeah, I won't be there. I didn't make the cut for the Cool Kids Club, but I'm glad you'll be there. It should be really great. But so this will be recorded. Please feel free to forward to anyone else on your team. And then, of course, we always have our RADF workshop page for all things community of practice. The link will take you to, it'll ask you for a password. The password is all caps community. So always look there for our schedule and updates, resources, recordings, and all things SNAP employment and training. And with that said, that brings us to the end of our session together. I'm going to stop sharing and recording. Any final questions, thoughts? Words of wisdom? Are these helpful?